The crowd roars as the mace smashes to pieces against a tortoise man's shell. Unharmed, the reptile counters with a quarterstaff to the face. He taunts,
Try again, cow. You can do nothing to my impenetrable defense. Try your right arm. Maybe it would fare a little better. A slight scratch, possibly.
The Minotaur Gladiator, better known as the Bullworm, swishes the taste of mint around his mouth, spitting the fake blood onto the ground. All right, villain, but you asked for it. He rips off the muzzle, and the tentacle attached to his right shoulder launches forward, mouth gnashing. The tortoise nods, signaling for the next part of the script. The tentacle latches onto his arm and yanks, ripping off the fake, leaving an illusion of a bleeding stump. No! The turtle screams and falls, clutching the illusory stump in defeat. The bullworm reattaches the muzzle on his arm and looks to the prince of the arena. The robed, crowned man gives a thumbs up, letting the bout end there with the bullworm standing as the victor. Hiya, I'm Ink, they them pronouns, and welcome to my Nook. That opening scene was written according to the creature we are creating today. So if you like that, stay tuned to see how it was made and how you can use it at your table. This is a series I call Dungeon Deck, where we create strange creatures and NPCs for tabletop RPGs, including a creature card with art, stats, ability names, and core phrases. Now, with that all out of the way, let's get started. As always, we begin with the art prompts. So here we draw 7 cards and select 4 to use for our monster. This week's set is odd. A hoof, propeller, quills, empty eyes, hand, weird wormy mouth, and a minotaur head. Well, first off, let's get that propeller out of here. It doesn't fit at all with the rest. The hoof will be next. Earlier in the stream where I drew this, we already got a hooved creature, and so I just wanted to throw that out. Then I asked chat which card was the last to be eliminated. After some deliberation, the hand was chosen. So we're left with some quills, the wormy mouth, empty eyes, and a minotaur head. A pretty interesting set. Now, what will we do with this grouping of cards? How will we actually put them together? Well, let's start off with the conflicting pair. The worm mouth and the minotaur head. They don't really work together as a whole. They both take up what would go on the end of the torso. So chat and I talked about it, and we thought about doing a worm stomach thing. Or maybe we could put a mouth on the head, take a clue from the minotaur head's roundness on the prompt, but then that would also conflict with the eyes card, so we were really confused. Then we figured it out. The wormy part can actually be a tentacle arm. That'll work with what we already have. Then we can toss the head onto a quick neck sketch, and at this point, the guy's gotta be beefy. So it is pretty simple to put the weird blind empty eyes on the head instead of the regular ones. And at this point, we decided that this guy was going to be a gladiator. So we can toss the quills onto the armor. Though there's one more detail I wanted to add on to this guy. As a gladiator, he'd need a more typical, if not regular, weapon. It's something flashy. So for someone beefy, it would also need to stand up to punishment. Something like an axe or a hammer, but those are so often overused. Instead, I wanted to go for an overlooked historical weapon, the disc mace. We'll go deeper into why this particular weapon in the lore, but suffice it to say, it's such a cool thing that just needs to be better represented in fantasy as a concept. Okay, with that, we already have set up for an awesome gladiator NPC that really spices up the arena. Now, let's start heading to the next section, the lore. Alrighty, before we do anything too special in the lore, let's establish our inspirations. First off, we have the art itself. That's a given. But I want to add some more spice to this soup. Let's take inspiration from ancient gladiators, but also their modern counterparts, which are, somewhat hot take, professional wrestlers. If you think about it, they're a great example of combat entertainment, so we can take some fun ideas from that sphere. First off, this is going to be as cheesy and as wild as modern day wrestling matches. The storytelling should be a mess, involving things both inside and outside the ring. We would have rivalries, heels, faces, and even matches with the management and promoters of the Coliseum where they compete. There'd be costumes, magical fireworks, and the whole 9 yards. Next, they'd use similar tricks. No entertainment manager would want real duels to the death. That's just wasteful. So instead, why not go with a bunch of semi-choreographed bouts that would end up with a thumbs up or thumbs down? Most of the time you'd get a thumbs up, but then when there's a thumbs down, oh, that's when things get really wild. And you get someone with like resurrection magic on standby, like to immediately happen upon the death. Of course, that's also really expensive, and you would have to pay the fighter a lot to deal with the fact that they are actually physically dying. So you don't want to do that anywhere near often. But there's one snag to those ideas of it's all a show and nobody actually gets hurt. What about those weapons? Well, they could be fake show props buffed up with illusions. For example, our gladiator's mace could maybe be padded but enchanted to look sharp and solid. On top of that, you could build in some fun tricks to emphasize the highs of fights. Again, to our gladiator, that disc could be set up to like trick with a crack and shatter when hit in a certain way. So that would be a great way to keep things safe and entertaining while imitating real combat, as in the original opening scene that we have. However, yet again, we have one more major thing that is not explained. How did this guy get the tentacle arm with that big mouth thing? Well, maybe that's the one real part to this farce. There are just so many ways this faux combat could go wrong, so what if one time it did go wrong? What if one of those opportunities for failure happened? Let's set the scene. As part of one of the narratives, a demon summoner, Zaphon, joins the lineup, and maybe Zaphon's creatures are actual monsters captured by adventurers and then puppeteered by magic during the fights. Then maybe the monster, in this case like an adolescent black worm, let's say, is stronger than they expect, and it breaks free. Our gladiator is left with nothing but a trick weapon and his own wits in a suddenly very real fight. That would be terrifying. Well, the show must go on, and while the actual combatants are rushing to the arena, our gladiator stalls and fights off this minion that wrested itself from even the great Zaphon's control. Unfortunately, his arm is bitten off, mangled, and swallowed by the worm before the creature can be subdued. Missing arms, even in fantasy settings, are hard to regrow. But maybe you could replace it. But even then, you'd need amazing medicine and healing magic to connect two such different creatures and like make them, function together. Where would that happen? Because, there's obviously plenty of places in fantasy where you could have like this wild level of healing magic, but one that has been recurring in these videos. That's right. We're back to the breathing continent. So, for those of y'all who don't know, the breathing continent is a setting where I place some of my monsters, gradually building up the lore for this place as we go. The main idea is that it's like a living continent with all that entails. Random eyes, hands, and mouths growing out of the ground being turned into puppets. Infections causing dungeons to open up from the earth. And people getting their arms turned into wings as like, oh yeah, hey, I just want to have wings. And now we'll have a gladiator who has a transplanted limb from a monstrous worm. So going back to their narrative, for a long time, the fans must have known nothing about their beloved fighter's condition. Last time they saw him, he was surrounded by medics as the actually real adventurers came in and sliced up that monstrous worm. Maybe he's dead. Maybe he quietly left the business. Maybe there was a surgery and it went wrong and the worm took over our fighter's body, and now it seeks revenge on its original master, Zafan. That last one was a bit too specific to be from anywhere but the original fight promoters. So no matter what, when the posters went up claiming that there would be a familiar face returning to the ring after a horrible disaster, the Colosseum's tickets sold out, and with bated breath, the audience awaited his return. As each bout came and went, the audience watched and wondered, where would he come in? Then, interrupting another bout entirely, Zafan burst through the arena wall, missing an arm, thrown by a mysterious cloaked figure, tentacle arm forward, crunching up what looked to be a thin, tattooed human limb. The audience recognized him by the horns, and our wrestler returned to the stage as someone cursed to fight his new transplant for control over his body. So, in reality, the implant was a full success and saved our fighter from a death by blood loss. Zafan's missing arm was just illusion magic. So now our guy is just chilling. He enjoys the fame the disaster brought. Maybe he'll get the new arm replaced with a normal arm, maybe not. For now, our gladiator is satisfied with his semi-retirement. All he does is appear in the occasional show and distributes the boatload of gold from the negligence payout to various charities throughout the city. We have one more important detail though from random commenter, aka Penguin. Our fighter, he gives wonderful hugs. All right, on that note, if you're enjoying this video, please drop me a quick like and subscribe. And thanks to random commenter, Monkey23, and Karma the Kettengrad for showing up to stream and helping me out with making these monsters. If you want to join in on the monster making process, stop on by this Sunday at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. That's where I hang out and make these monsters as well as the lore. Now, for the question of the week. If you were a pro wrestler styled gladiator, what would be your gimmick? Submit your answers in the comments below. Now, let's go back and get out our creature card. We can start filling that out. First off will be the name. I like to think that our gladiator is like a half minotaur. So how that ended up with his heritage, we'll leave to the imagination. But to honor that, I'll start by looking up names from the country of origin for minotaurs, Greece. Heracles is an offshoot of Heracles, according to a website I found. And Heracles, also known as Hercules in the Roman version of the myths, is the demigod of strength, so fairly fitting for our character. Let's go with that as the real first name. But of course, we gotta have a cool ring name. This can go fairly stereotypical, so let's go for the bull. But of course, that was before the implant. So maybe we can call him the bull worm. Unfortunately, this doesn't really refer to any real life creature, but apparently there's something about SpongeBob referencing this as like a monstrous creature. Not sure about that one. Let me know in the comment section if you have any ideas of what that story is. But we'll keep with this bullworm as like a name since it just has such a fun ring to it. Next up are the abilities. These will help illustrate what our gladiator can do and the moves and tools he uses to run the show. Starting out, I want to do something with that disc mace. It's an awesome part of his kit and was his signature weapon before the transplant. As we already discussed, it is padded and has the ability to shatter the disc on command. So how we illustrate that, let's call it a trick disc mace. This alludes to the fakeness of the prompt, also calling back to like the Bloodborne trick weapons with their multiple modes, and it leaves plenty of room for folks to interpret like what the disc mace's tricks can be, like expanding on that idea beyond just, oh yeah, you can shatter the disc. Next up, let's go for that arm. It's such a huge part of his new gimmick that it really just deserves an individual ability. Let's allude to the tentacle arm as a whole rather than like a specific move with it. How about devouring tentacle transplant? It gives all the major parts of the arm's function, and it eats things, it's a tentacle, and it was transplanted onto his body. Fantastic. Last but not least, let's go for that ability to keep a show going even when the danger ramps up. Like when Heracles originally lost his arm. It could be the show goes on. I mean, like that's a classic phrase, but I want to go with something more specific. I like the idea that the bullworm still maintains his heroic face status, even with this new like possessed era. He's always fighting for good and right. So let's combine those aspects of the show continuing and heroics. Heroes show a brave face. This phrase can actually work with Heracles specifically, since he had to put on a brave face himself when the worm broke free. These abilities are a pretty cool toolkit for this kind of character. Signature weapon, body gimmick, and passive to help out when things go wrong. It's perfect for a variety of storylines and snafus that can happen during a combat show. Now we have the stats. We'll be using the D&D 5th edition stat spread, but the numbers will refer to the modifiers instead of the stats themselves. Strength. This will go to a 5. To be the bull in the arena, you gotta be bulked out, and on top of that, the worm arm probably helps out on that front. Constitution. Let's say that this is a 3. To go through losing an arm and having an invertebrate's top half grafted onto your body, you cannot be sickly. You have to be real freaking tough. Dexterity. We can do a 1. Sure, you need some kind of like sleight of hand to get things past the crowd, but if they're anything like the wrestling folks I've met, most will be pretty drunk and very happily will go along with the bit even if they see things. Wisdom, -1. You must be a fool to be a gladiator. Putting your body through that kind of stuff day in, day out is ridiculous. If you want to see like even half of how bad it could get, take a look at some pro wrestling documentaries. There's pretty much always a moment where they say, and it was taking a huge toll on the body, leading this person to use or abuse painkillers to just get through the day. So, charisma. We'll put that at like a 4. The whole point of being a gladiator is putting on a show, and Heracles the bullworm is, of course, great at getting an audience going. Overall, this seems to be a pretty fun stat spread, encouraging some wild situations. High physical and low int or wisdom tends to lead in that direction, but also adding charisma and a showboaty attitude just makes it even better. I mean, imagine your party coming in to like a bar fight with this guy. Finally, we have the core phrases. These are a set of statements or questions that help characterize monsters and guide DMs on how to play these creatures in a unique and interesting way. Power gets the cheers. Heracles puts a lot of feats of strength into his bouts. It's part of his original gimmick, and he's certainly happy to provide. But in addition to that, the applause he gets from those moments, like with many performers, are a big reason why he goes back to the arena again and again. I'll be their hero. Heracles loves being the face and wants to keep inspiring people to do better and better things. If they can look up to him and try to do more, that's when he's done his job. Others deserve the money. To me, one of the things I hear about the most is the generosity of wrestlers. How often they do what they can to help others who are a lot less fortunate. Heracles, I think, would be part of that tradition and would greatly enjoy the smiles of the people he helps as much or even more than the cheers from the stands. So overall, these core phrases paint Heracles as a generous and kind person who's happy to use his fame to uplift less fortunate. It feels like he would be a great NPC to put in a city, especially for how players could interact with him during like an investigation, or as they come back from a quest, they could catch one of his bouts. Maybe they would even serve as staff for dealing with like the caged monsters. And of course, Heracles, with like his backstory involving that, would double triple check with them. Hey, is everything like truly absolutely secure? Are you good on this front? And that would lead to a whole mess of situations. Either way, there's a lot of potential for games set in the city with the arena and this NPC. And that's that. Thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned as we keep making more and more monsters. And again, stop by my streams if you want to join in on the making process. So with that, let's bring this video to a close. For those of you with dark skies, good night. And if you have bright days, good morning. Whatever part of the world you're from, I hope you have a lovely morning, afternoon, evening, and night. Goodbye!